This week, Assumptions is brought to you by the Alberta Treasury Branch. In particular, I would love to highlight the Entrepreneur Centre. Currently, I am recording this message in Media Lab YYC, which is located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I could not have gotten this to where it is if it hadn't been for the Entrepreneur Centre. That's where I went to get a business loan, and that is how now people can come and record their own podcasts or film their own online videos. It's a great, great place that does a bunch of different services. Of course, they can help you with your banking, but they also offer workshops and networking opportunities. They can also help you get set up with a mentor. So if you're looking at starting or building a business, look at the Entrepreneur Centre here in Calgary. Now on to the episode. Daniel, it has been a long time.
It's been a long time. I would sing the song by the Beatles about it's been a long time, but we can't, so.
No. A, we don't have the copyright for that. And secondly, it is all your fault.
Is it?
I fall down to my knees. Eyes are raised to the sky.
I think we've both been very busy. But our plan was in July when we concluded season 1 of Assumptions to plow right into our work on season 2. And I'm still incredibly excited for that season. I think it's going to be controversial and popular and tackles questions that we ask of ourselves every day, but also that are very pertinent for our culture right now. Questions on sexuality and relationships and what it is to be in community. But things have conspired to get in our way.
Yeah, a lot of things. I think we're going to be exploring those over the next couple episodes.
That's right.
Before season 2 officially hits, we're going to do a few interludes together. Next, what you can expect is going to have an interview with me. There's going to be an interview with Daniel just to catch everyone up on what we've been doing outside of the podcast. But this week's episode is going to be all about what we've been consuming in our downtime.
That's right. We love pop culture. We still love pop culture, even if we're busy doing other stuff. And we, both of us, the reason we became friends way back 5 years ago was that we're both tall, and that right away... No, it's because we love talking about pop culture. We love asking questions and articulating why we find the culture we consume so fascinating. And we've both been doing that on our own, and we want to kind of share that and ask each other what it is about those items.
Exactly. I'll jump right in, Daniel, because I think some of the stuff that I have been watching is, I won't necessarily make the argument that it's good necessarily, but I did decide to go down it. I've been watching the whole Saw franchise, partly because of this Calgary videomakers group that I'm a part of. That's their monthly get-togethers. We'll be watching Jigsaw, the newest Saw movie.
And like anybody, you just said, I have to watch all 6 of the prequels before I can go watch a movie.
No, Daniel, I said I had to watch all 7 of the prequels before I could see this
My
other
bad.
one. Yeah, you're bad.
Okay, so Jaws, we did an episode on horror films.
Yes.
This is a little bit different though, isn't it? Because it's not, I mean, the horror films we were talking about were more supernaturally themed, good versus evil, but this is more like a slasher gore fest, am I right? So how much of Satan dwells in this film, and how much of our current goodness of culture has been ruined by its box office hits?
Wow, this is a bit of a loaded question, don't you think, Daniel? Yeah, okay, so I mean, the gist of this movie franchise, for those of you who may not know about it, is that there is this man named Jigsaw who constructs these elaborate games, and I call them like these Rube Goldberg machines that people have to try and escape from, otherwise they are killed. And I'm really fascinated by movies that spawn tons of sequels.
Okay.
Most of the time it's because they're really cheap to produce and they're going to get enough money in their return. So I understand the financial side of it, but there's still something about it. Like, there has to be something about these movies that inspires to be so much well, what used to be called celluloid devoted to them.
Right.
At least, enough bits.
Sure,
that have
in
been-
a sense that they've been that popular, then people are watching that says something about
Yeah.
our culture.
There was, for 6 years in a row, every Halloween, there was a new Saw movie that came out. It was something that everyone could predict that was going to happen. Now, like I said, I've done a video about this and other things on the internet. I think the first film, just the first film before they even knew that this was going to be a
Right.
movie franchise, is a decent B movie. I wouldn't say it's a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an interesting look at the serial killer trope that is in a lot of movies, jazzed up with this
Saws.
whole idea of like, oh, I'm giving these two people in a room and they need to escape, and I'm giving them all the tools to escape, but they have to try and figure out and work together to actually get out of this room. And is that actually going to happen?
Right.
And the first one really does take place mostly, I would say 75% of it takes place in one room. Like, you
Wow.
don't leave that one room. And so it was interesting.
Yeah,
It intrigued
sure.
me. It was interesting. And then after that, it pretty much devolves into just as gruesome as you can possibly think, killing people. I mean, even in the first film, you have someone cutting his own leg off. Like, that is part of the film.
127 hours. I mean,
I
it
guess
happens
so.
all the time.
It
guys.
happens all the time in these movies, right? So I think that there is that type of, I don't know, people want to understand what it's like. I think what they like to envision themselves in that situation and what they would do to get out of it.
Sure, it kind of goes back to, I mean, Greek mythology, right? Of being trapped in a maze with a bull monster. It's a variation on that theme that we've been talking about for 2,000 years.
Much like the Minotaur, it devolves into a lot of BS by the end of it. But
yeah.
So there is definitely, I think there's that aspect to it that people just like to, I don't know, there's some sort of gratification that people get out of it.
Sure.
However, I don't know. I don't want to overstate or even understate how bad these movies actually are. Like, they get into some where it's just killing people in fantastical ways, and I'm just not the type of viewer that really enjoys that type of entertainment.
I know this because I'm your friend, but for our listeners that aren't, you do this a lot. You'll sit down with an entire franchise and watch every single film in the King Kong franchise, for example. Why do you do that? What is it about you that makes you want to do this?
There's a completionist aspect to it. I'd like to be able to speak from a little bit of authority.
Okay.
So when I say those movies are no good or I don't like that type of entertainment,
Sure.
I can give them specific reasons why, or why it doesn't really,
Okay.
I don't know, why it isn't good, why I can actually give them specific reasons.
See, I feel like that makes sense for a classic. Like, if you're going to I'm going to watch all of Steven Spielberg's films.
Sure.
Makes more sense than saying I'm going to watch every B-sided horror film so I can be the authority in the theater when we all go see Jigsaw next week.
Yeah, I guess there is a part of me that somewhat rejects the need to be highbrow all the time.
Okay.
Where the majority of people, I mean, this
Sure.
happened at the Oscars a few years ago when Chris Rock was hosting, but he actually did a really interesting bit where he just went to a movie theater and just read out, here are the nominees for Best Picture. Have you seen them?
Yeah.
And like the majority of people had not even heard of most of the
Right.
movies that were nominated. And I think that does speak to something where it's like the regular moviegoer
Right.
does not go out and watch those films. They're watching these B-movie, pulpy type of stuff. And I don't think that necessarily is a bad thing, but I still think that I demand better from
Right.
that type of entertainment.
Okay. So, but yeah, and in a sense, if we're concerned about culture and we're fascinated by culture, the higher art is trying to push people up, but most people consume lower art.
Yeah.
To that argument. So, which is better for us to do? Do we consume the high art and then and try to see where things are going with high art, or do we go down to the pop level? I mean, it reminds me of Earworm, the Vox YouTube channel, which just looks at pop music.
Yeah.
And so it's not analyzing the classic, the best Metacritic albums that are out there. It's just looking at songs that are hits, and they're analyzing those hit songs. And yeah, it does say something about the culture itself. So what did you learn about the B-movie going culture as we look down on them with our...
Well, it's interesting because I think there is a lot of stuff to talk about within Saw. There is a lot of Christian allegory and Christian symbolism that happens
That's what you
in
think.
it. So I think that there is definitely stuff that we, even in this podcast, that we could really delve into and talk about in a much more fuller way. But what I come out of it from more is that these movies are much more enjoyed by the very end of the movie, where you actually see what was actually going on, because that's the conceit of the movies, is that there is a plot that's happening in the movie, but it's not till the very end where it's actually what was really going on this whole time is this. And then it kind of does a bunch of little flashbacks, and it's like, if you had been paying attention, you would have been able to put these clues together.
Detective style.
Yeah. You would have actually seen that the killer was actually this girl over here the entire time. It had nothing to do with like this big elaborate game that was going on.
Right. So kind of this sense of people that are trapped in a world symbolized by the room or whatever contraption they're in, and going through the motions, you're forced to go through the motions, but really there's something else going on. That does that make you angry, or does that make the people in the plot angry, that they're being controlled, as it were, in this manner?
Yeah, that's always what it is. Like, that's the resounding theme that happens again and again. People don't like to feel like they have no control or no agency in this game that's been concocted for them.
Do you think that's one of the complaints of people that are opposed to Christianity, that they say that this kind of complaint, fist against God? I have no control over what's happening. Why are you doing all of this?
I think it's more, and I can only speak, I guess, from my point of view, and what I've spoken with others, is that it's more, there seems to be these set of rules that have been put in place that don't feel relevant or resonant to our current, I don't know, culture that's going on. So it's like, you have to do these things or you're not a Christian, and you're going to, burn in hell.
Sure, we're going to talk about homosexuality quite a bit, I think, on our upcoming season.
Exactly.
And maybe that's one of those ones where, okay, if people are driven towards this desire and they can't change that, then how dare God not make that a valid option for living life?
Right. Like, to use the Saw analogy, it seems like you're gaming the system a little bit. It's like, yeah, you're giving me this choice, in quotes. I want to be very careful with that, because I do not think that homosexuality is a choice. But you're giving me this choice in life, but if I do what I want to do, then I'm going to end up in a worse state than before, and that doesn't seem fair in it. Now, there could be a broader conversation about whether life should be fair, but that I think is not really what we're getting into here now.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the biblical story of Job. So this guy who is complaining against God. Things are going terrible for him, and he says, "God, how can you do all this?" In the end, God says, "Well, you aren't me. Like, how did you create the world? Did you do all these things? Did you create all the sea monsters that are in the depths of the sea? Did you make all the jewels that are in the depths of the mountains? And like, did you create weather? Because I did that. So how dare you complain against me?" Like, in Job's story, the system in a sense is rigged. The backstory that the viewer gets, the reader of the story, but Job never finds out. It's a battle between Satan and God over if Job will crumble or not. So it's got that kind of, if the box that with the saws are the world and all of Job's troubles, there's definitely a connection between those two stories.
Yeah. I mean, there's another connection that's going on, and this is kind of a segue into, I know, something that you wanted to talk about, is that Saw had these 7 films that came out, right? And there hasn't been a Saw film, I don't think, since 2009, I think is the last one that came
Saw
out.
3D or something like that.
So that was the 7th one that came out. And now there's this new film that's coming out that I'm seeing tonight called Jigsaw, right? So I feel that this is actually this nostalgia culture that is creeping back into the mainstream, and something that I kind of fight with a whole lot. It's like, am I liking this because it's something I liked when I was a kid, or do I like this because it's legitimately good? Why do we need an update to Star Wars every year? Even though I like it, I go to the movies and I enjoy myself. But is this something that is good for our culture, or are we just infantilizing a whole new adult class in society?
Totally. Yeah, no, I think about that a lot when it comes to sequels and I mean, even looking at broader, how long has that happened in human culture? How often have we gone back to the old tropes and try and carry them out again?
Another Gilgamesh? Come
exactly,
on, guys.
Right? Come on, guys.
Come on, unknown author.
Ulysses and the Odyssey? I mean, what a ripoff.
Peace in the valley, lightning will strike.
This week, Assumptions is also brought to you by the Alberta Podcast Network. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. I myself would like to highlight one of the other podcasts on the network, which is called Tight Ends, which when you hear the tagline, you're going to want to go and listen to them. It's a sports podcast for the rest of us. We don't know much about football, but we know a tight end when we see one. Daniel and I are maybe not be the biggest sports fans, but we are big podcast fans, and we are over the moon that the Alberta Podcast Network is a sponsor for this week's episode. If you want to see more podcasts that are on the network or help to support its mission, you can go to albertapodcastnetwork.com.
Peace in the valley, I cannot say where I will lay down at the end of the day.
As I've been going into a new social environment and thinking about what is even our role as a podcast, one thing that struck me when we announced our podcast that we are two friends that are going to be talking about faith in this way was just the amount of interest we got from friends. Doesn't matter if they were Christian or if they were Buddhist or if they were atheist. They were excited about this. And I think in my church context, there often are a lot of people that have this antagonistic view of how the world's changing and saying that it's going to become less and less friendly towards Christians. And while I think that can be the case, what I'm finding is that there's actually a lot more, there's openness to spirituality and there's an openness to discussions about faith, maybe just not under the cultural formats that have been this way in Western civilization, especially in America and the church. And so one of the things that reminded me of this is I've had the incredible opportunity to interview David Lowery, the director. So he did Ain't Them Body Saints, he did Disney's remake of Pete's Dragon, and then he did the film that's been buzzed about quite a bit, A Ghost Story.
I have seen none of those films.
And instead you watch all 7 Saw
I watched
films.
all 7 Saw films instead. I could watch this critically acclaimed movie, but I have to see what Jigsaw's up to.
Let's watch some more people die.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting conversation because David Lowery is someone who he grew up, I guess, in a faith background of some sort in Texas, but has he himself is not antagonistic, but agnostic towards the faith. And yet his films, especially A Ghost Story, are fascinated by eternity and fascinated by the questions that we've been talking about. How, if this world will end eventually and all that's in it and the sun will burn out, why do we create? Or is there something else beyond this world? And I had a very frank discussion with him about those themes. And I came as a Christian. I said, I'm a Christian. Here's what I believe, but here's the things that I still struggle with. And we had that discussion. It was great. Now, so that's just something that I've been thinking about. And you and I, Kyle, have done a little bit of reading and listening to the themes from Charles Taylor, the Canadian philosopher, and his book, A Secular Age. And what he talks about is how our age has built a structure of belief that blocks out the transcendent. That means there's no longer a valid reason to believe in God. Our world can exist without him. And yet there's a searching and a yearning for something else. And so that intersection of those two beliefs, I think is a very exciting time to have these kinds of conversations. And the reason I was thinking about this specifically was a band that you and I are both fans of, Arcade Fire.
Yeah, for sure.
When did you see them live?
I saw them live when they were doing their Reflector tour.
Okay, yeah.
So that would have been 4 years ago.
Something like that.
Oh, maybe I'm
15, 14.
It was a while ago.
It was a while ago, yeah. And did you listen to their music?
I did. So I came across them with their Neon Bible album.
Sure.
Which I can't remember exactly when that was released, but it would have had to have been in the early 2000s, back when I was still working at the bookstore, when I was a manager at a bookstore. And I was actually drawn to it just based on the cover art alone.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's a really striking image.
Yeah, it's this Bible made out of neon tubes.
And it's like,
lights.
you know what, I'll try it out. I get a discount on these CDs anyways if I really hate it.
Oh, it was CDs?
Yes,
Okay,
I actually got a CD.
Did you fly those things, or were they?
Yeah, I actually had to chisel out the CD by hand in order to listen to it. I actually paid for physical media in my lifetime. It's weird world. And so I listened to it and literally fell in love. I really, really liked
What'd
their
you like
music.
about it?
Well, it's really hard for me to talk about music, I find, because I just don't think I have the language that's needed to really discuss it in a really, evolved way. For me, it was a marriage between rock music
Yeah.
and kind of poppy music
Sure.
in a really interesting way. It's like, because I'm a big fan of like David Bowie and some of like the glam rockers like Queen, it seemed like it was a mashup of those two things that I
Right.
really like, all in like one band.
Yeah.
It's like the layering of their vocals.
Yeah.
They seem to do really interesting instrumentation.
Yeah, I think part of it is they're a married couple. He's American, immigrated to Canada, studied at McGill, and her background is from Haiti.
Yeah, she grew up in Haiti.
Yeah, and so you have this kind of world funk beat going on, and this almost danceable grooves that they create, even organically, melded with this anthem rock sound that they've created, and it's very much, I feel like it's a music for our times because we're in this age of multiple ethnicities, and we still like rock and roll.
I think that's, for me, this is how I would term it,
Yeah.
and I know this is going to sound much more poetic than I'm really trying to intend,
You're a
but it did
poet.
feel like the world was making music. That's what it felt like that
Yeah,
band
yeah.
was for me.
Yeah.
And so I followed with them. I eventually went and got their first album, which
Yeah.
was called Funeral, and then their The Suburbs that
Yep.
came out, and then their last one was called...
Everything Now. Okay, so let's talk about their lyrics a little bit. Do you have any, as you've been listening to them over the years and seen them live, does anything stand out from their lyrics, just casually as the observer?
Well, just because we're having this conversation, there is references to religion, I think, that pops up in there. I mean, even their album was called Neon
Yeah,
Bible.
totally.
I think what they are very interested in is this new age that we find ourselves
Yeah,
in, where I think everyone is searching for something
Yeah.
deeper, and we keep thinking we're filling that need, but it seems to be continually being empty promises for us.
Yeah.
And then what does that mean for us? If we don't believe in God, or we don't believe in a spirituality, what does that leave us? And where can
Yeah.
we actually find
Totally.
this answer? And I haven't analyzed their lyrics enough to really tell you what their answer is, or what I
Sure.
think their answer would actually be. You'll probably have a better understanding of that.
Yeah, I haven't done a deep analysis of their music, but I absolutely agree with you that, I mean, he studied at McGill religion. That was his degree. And if you go to his Twitter account, he actually follows James K. Smith, who we've both seen live, theologians like John Piper and Timothy Keller, as well as people from the left and all over the place. So he's quite interested in these things as a person anyways.
Do you know where he falls on the
I
religion
don't.
spectrum?
He grew up Mormon.
Oh, he did.
Which
I
is
didn't know
interesting,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
So he does critique the church quite often, and whether that's the Mormon church or just church in general. But just the fact that he's engaging in these things, I think, is fascinating. But
We haven't said his name. We should probably say his name.
yeah, what's his name?
Win Taylor.
Win Butler, right?
Sorry. Yes.
Win Butler. Yeah.
Yeah.
We love
Win
you, Win.
Butler.
Sorry we don't know your name. You make great
No,
music.
I said Win Taylor because we were just talking about someone with Taylor. That's
Charles
how tired
Taylor,
I
yeah.
am, apparently.
So, our generation, meaning millennials, we tend to despise U2.
Me too, or
U2.
Oh, the band.
The band,
U2.
yeah.
Got it. Yes.
Right? There's this kind of sense of a dislike of them.
I would say so. I'd say most people in my age
Yeah.
group are not that big of a fan
Totally.
of U2. They might like a song here and there, but
Right. And what is it about them that irks people?
from my point of view, it is the fact that Bono specifically comes off as preachy.
Yeah.
I can only talk from my own background. I've never really found that to be the
Sure,
case
yeah.
necessarily, but I can also understand that point of view where anytime you see Bono, he's either like, we have to do this, we have to stand
Yeah.
up for these rights, like,
Yeah.
or he's talking about his own like religion background. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think that is what causes people to
Yeah.
push back a bit.
It's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine in Vancouver, and we're talking about artists that struggle with faith, and how the artists, whether they're filmmakers or authors or musicians, that are struggling with faith, that haven't totally been committed to a certain belief yet, their music is the most helpful when it comes about talking about faith. And it's
Yeah.
once someone fully commits to a belief that their music becomes less exciting that way. And it's just an interesting thing about U2 in that way, because their albums, The Joshua Tree and Achtung Baby, where they really were challenging these things, were the most exciting. And now Bono is very committed as a Christian and outspoken about that. And I still like their music, but you could say it has lost some of that sense of,
Sure.
I haven't found what I'm looking for yet, to quote him directly. The reason I bring up U2 is they are an anthem band. They're the kind of band
Right.
that writes these songs that you go to the concerts and the whole crowd sings along. And I feel like Arcade Fire is our generation our generation's version of that. Because I felt this when I was at their concert, and I'm sure you have too. But people sing along. They are encouraged to sing along. And they've written songs that have singable, repetible lyrics to it.
Well, just to go back to kind of a conversation we were having last season, where like the movie theater to a lot of people is kind of like going to church in many ways. And I think that there are also those people who going to concerts is a very religious experience where they get that call and response and they feel elated by the time that they leave.
Something bigger going on.
There's something bigger than them. And I think that Arcade Fire or U2 or any other band really, when they have that kind of connection with an audience, it is like that gathering place. It is like going to a church service because you're getting sometimes the same feelings inside of you, at least from the secular side.
Yeah, a sense of belonging and a sense of piercing through to something higher, even if it's just for that night.
I don't want to lose this concept because of something else that you said. I think that there's also, again, from my perspective, it's more interesting. I think there's better art when there's people who are struggling through something instead of like, I've got it all figured out, man. This is what you need to do.
Yeah.
That's just not as exciting when it is like, I haven't found what I'm looking for yet. Like, that's an interesting concept. And to express that out loud is just more interesting. I mean, like, I found what I'm looking for. It's pretty cool.
It's interesting that you say that, and in the context of my interview with David Lowery, because when I got that gig, I reached out to a contact on Twitter that I'm friends with, who is he's an artist, and he does a lot of artist with Christian type, and his organization had interviewed David Lowery in a faith type context. And I just said, do you have any advice? And he said, well, don't walk in as if you have all the answers. Open yourself up and say, here's the things that I'm struggling with in thinking through these topics of creativity and transcendence. And so I went with that attitude in mind. I mean, very similar to our podcast, and it just got some great responses from him. So yeah, even in having these kind of discussions, I mean, yeah, I'm not opposed to having a committed belief and having a thought through system. That's important, but at least the humility to say, this could change. And I still have questions. I still have doubts. That opens up the space of dialogue.
Yeah, or even saying, like, I struggled through this. It was not easy to get to this position.
Totally. And when I lie at night, sometimes I still ask questions about these things I definitely believe in. But that's part of what it is to be human, I think.
How do they put the caramel in the caramel bar?
I don't know, man. Kinder Surprises. How do they get those toys inside chocolate?
Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense out there.
Coming back to Arcade Fire, though. So if you were to compare U2 to Arcade Fire, one of the distinctions I think Arcade Fire does that is essential for making them relevant to this generation is a sense of irony that they have. Our generation loves irony and loves this kind of this jadedness, I guess. You can't be too much sincerity comes across wrong. And when I saw Arcade Fire last for their Everything Now tour, they had this balancing act between ironic imitation of consumerism and kind of just don't care, don't give an F in terms of what's happening here, to very sincere, heartbreaking, sing-along believability. That balancing act, I think, is something that U2 back in the day didn't necessarily do, but now they have.
I think that's an interesting point. I'm curious about you specifically. Like, how do you balance that? I mean, we obviously are in a capitalistic society, which means that buying things makes the economy run and makes social services be a thing that we have. But is there a time where you feel like, man, it's just like, it feels gross almost?
Totally.
That I'm being advertised to all the time, that I'm always asked to buy something, and there doesn't seem to be an actual value on humanity sometimes?
Yeah, 100%.
I'm loading that question. I'm just going to let people know.
No, actually, I never feel that. No, I do. And I think one of the things that, if you look at historic Christianity, the sense of fasting and a sense of occasional retreat from that kind of life, it may be one of those solutions to it, where you're saying, I don't need this. And whether that's our current consumerist age with pop-up ads all the time, or if that's just living life and the kind of the constant whirling of the brain and the constant engaging, just taking a step back. And that's part of why the disciplines for me of prayer, disciplines of Sabbath, taking a day off, and the discipline of meditating on the Word, on the Bible, is a kind of way to say, this whole world and everything that's here and everything that's going on in my brain, never mind what I'm being showered at from the outside, it's not enough. It's not going to satisfy. I need something deeper and something truer than that.
I think that's why people go camping. I know that's
Yeah.
a really weird analogy I'm about to make, but I think for myself, there gets to a point where like, I just like I have my phone and the computer and there's noises. And it's like at a certain point, I just need to go and visit my parents that live out in the country, turn all that off, and be like, I just am going to exist for a moment. I just don't need all this stimulus coming at me all the time. I do have a question for you about Arcade Fire.
Good.
Can you narrow down a favorite song?
No, because I'm an album guy.
What's your favorite album then?
Reflector.
Yeah.
And I think
why Reflector? 'Cause
why Reflector?
That's actually
Yeah.
where I've thought about it because we actually talked a little bit about this before we started recording a few days ago. I've changed what my favorite song is.
Okay,
and
what's
it's actually
your
from
favorite?
Reflector.
Okay, what was it before?
I think I told you it was
Wake Up.
Wake Up. Thank
Children
you.
Don't Wake
I
Up.
told you Wake Up
Yeah.
a few days ago, but thinking about it more, I think We Exist is actually my favorite song.
Interesting. Why is that?
Well, I think we looked at a few different ways, and definitely if you watch the video for that song, it is very clearly trying to make an analogy between that music and the experience of a transsexual who's saying that, hey, we exist, you're trying to make us hide ourselves or disappear into the ether, but we actually exist and we're making a point. That video is a great video, by the way. It makes
I
me
haven't seen
cry.
the video. No.
Stars Andrew Garfield.
Okay.
Anyways, even if you don't take it for that very specific experience, I think you can use it in your own life. Like, hey, I am a person and I exist. And I think culture a lot of times is made to make you feel like you don't.
Yeah.
Where either
You're a product.
you're a product
Yeah.
or you're something to be marketed to. You're a segment and you're not Daniel. You're not Kyle. And that's, I know, a hard thing to do sometimes, but it's the fact of our society.
Well, and then thinking about it musically, so that was one of their. It was their first album to really incorporate more of a disco kind of beat to it. This very danceable African beat. And if you think about that song, it has this driving beat to it that keeps propelling you along. And it's even if you think of it that musically way, it's like the narrator saying, "I'm stuck in the system that keeps propelling me, and yet I exist. Like I want a voice that's trying to burst beyond that, but it's sucked back into the system." And I love Reflector. I think it was the first album that I truly fell in love with of theirs. I don't know if it's their best necessarily, but it was the one that I listened to on repeat month after month and became a soundtrack of my life. And I love how if it's a double album and the first half is very beat oriented, and then it starts to kind of push itself out from that, and it becomes much more yearning, talking about afterlife and what an awful word. I need something more than what I'm caught in. Yeah. Which is something that their more recent album, which came out, Everything Now, it hasn't received the best reviews of their discography, which is okay. I think it's fine for a band to just have fun and do an album for the sake of doing an album. But it's an album that tackles consumerism. If you go to their website right now, it's a bunch of pop-up ads. And it just
Really?
just
That's so
loads you
funny.
pop-up ads all over, and the pop-up ads are for the links for their tours and whatnot. But it talks about this driving sense that we need everything now, faster, better, more, all of it. And as people that work in technology or have worked in technology, Kyle, it's funny that it's all about creating something better, something faster. And if you don't get that, if your internet speed is low and you can't access that page, you get frustrated. You want more, and what is all that moreness doing to you? Is it making us less human?
Yeah, it's food for thought.
Yeah.
I would say yes. I don't know. I can't really add too much to that. I think that this is a good time to bring up this last thing that I've been consuming. It's something I just watched here the other day, and it was a stand-up special that's available on Netflix right now. It's called Annihilation, is what the stand-up special is called. It's hosted by Patton Oswalt, who is a favorite comedian of mine, mostly because he's a geek comic, which means like he does references to stupid things from the 80s and early 90s that only myself and some of my other generation will understand. It's like the in vogue thing now. It is that nostalgia culture a little bit. He was the voice of Remy in Ratatouille, so that's where most people will know him from. But for those of you who don't know, he suffered a great tragedy here this past year where his wife unexpectedly passed away. So it's him and his very young daughter, who's like 6 or 7 years old, have to deal with the fact that their wife and their mother are no longer there. And so this is his first stand-up special back, and he does take a few minutes in the middle of this special to really delve into what he's feeling, what he's thinking since the passing of his wife. But it's mostly the last 4 words that he says to close out the entire concert. And this is also after talking about like Donald Trump and what the American politics and what the world seemingly is like nowadays. But he says, it's chaos, be kind. And to me, what I take away from that is that with this chaotic world, with more, with faster, with all this stuff that's being thrown at us, it is chaotic out there. And really the only way that we can combat that in a really meaningful way is to be kind, not just to ourselves, but to one another at the same time. Otherwise, we are just getting consumed by the maelstrom of life.
So what you're saying is that in response to a world that often doesn't make sense, that doesn't have a system behind it, an order behind it, then you create your own order by your own morality.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. See, that's interesting because it's I think it's what a lot of people do, and I'm not saying that being kind is wrong. I think it's a great response to it, but I wonder if there's no valid reason to have that response, will that eventually not be enough? Will there eventually not be enough impetus to you to create that response because there's no reason for it?
When you say there's no reason for it, what do you mean?
Well, are you kind to other humans because they're made in the image of God? Are you kind to other people because there's a moral sense of justice that undergirds the world? Or is it just this whole world is chaos? Does that mean that why am I being kind if it's just if the only reason to be kind is chaos?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Not
so you're saying like
groundwork to it.
Yeah. If there's no change that you're seeing from being kind, then why be kind?
Or if there's no
place?
reason to be kind, except for if there's no authority behind your morals of being kind, then when push comes to shove, and when it's your food versus the other person, or you being killed versus the other person, are you really going to do that?
Yeah, I guess this is the argument that we're going to have over this next season a whole lot, because I still, in the back of my mind, don't feel like you need to have some moral authority above you saying that you have to be kind. I don't think I need to have anything more than it's like, hey, this is a good thing to do. But I understand where you're coming from, which is like there's going to be, if you're the only one doing that, or if you're one of only a few people doing that, then are you just not just being taken advantage of? Are you not just succumbing to the chaos itself?
Totally.
Food for thought. We'll be able to discuss that over this next season, I think, a little bit more in depth than that.
I just want to, when going to their recent concert, Arcade Fire's concert, they tackle a lot of these consumerist themes and these beats that kind of trapped you. And these anthems, they have a chorus on the Everything Now that's repeatable and the crowd would sing along to. And when you listen to their album, Everything Now, it starts out with this infectious beat for that opening song. It's a hit single, and for a good reason. But then as the songs progress, they start questioning things like, is there a good God? And one of their last songs on the album is We Don't Deserve Love. And so it's asking, why keep going? Why keep loving in a world that's all about consumerism, what we want? And they did that song, We Don't Deserve Love, as their encore. So they had done this very fun 2-hour-long concert full of all these hit songs that were often ironic, sometimes sing-alongable. But then they ended, and they came out with almost a different mood, and it was almost prayer-like. It was the two of them, Renee and Win, thank you, doing almost a duet. And by the end of the song, when her vocals become more and more melodic, she ends up crumpled up in the fetal position and just stays there hovered for the longest time. And it's a beautiful moment, my favorite moment of the whole concert. And after the band kind of left her there for a while, they started again in a much slower, more thoughtful version of the same chorus they'd opened the concert with, which is that We Want Everything Now. And they got the whole crowd to sing it along. And it was just interesting in the sense that we can have these moments of longing for something, but the system we're in traps us back in that chorus. And everyone's going to sing along to it. Now, they ended the concert with Wake Up, the anthem to wake up, literally. And they ended it in a way that caused the whole crowd to sing along. And they left the stage walking through the crowd, holding the mic out to the audience. So it was literally left on our shoulders to go with. And I just thought it was just a profound way of saying, through all this noise that is our society, all these pop-up consumerist ads and messages and everything playing in your head at once, there is still a yearning for transcendence, but that system keeps pulling us back into it. Right. And what is the response? And so I just love how they left that question with us. And it's a question I think we're going to keep exploring through our conversations.
Yeah, by the end of our second season, I'm fairly certain I'll be curled up in the fetal position as well.
Yeah, and I'll be chanting songs over you.
So what you're seeing is a regular Saturday night.
That's right.
I want to thank everyone who has listened and downloaded this podcast. We really want, Daniel and I both are aligned with this, is that we really want you to be more involved in the second season.
Do more, guys. Gosh.
we can only do so much, and I can only chastise Daniel for so long. But you can get in contact with us by emailing us at assumptionspod@gmail.com if you have criticisms of the show, or if you have things that you really like about the show, or if you have questions that you want Daniel or myself to answer, please send them in to that email address. You can also get in contact with us over on our Facebook page, facebook.com/assumptionspod. We have a nice little community being built up over there, so definitely come and interact over on Facebook. And there's also Twitter if you're over on that social media network, which is @assumptionspod.
That's right.
Daniel, if people want to get in contact with you on the internet, how is that a possibility?
Yeah, head over to my website, danielmelvillejones.com. That's Daniel, MELVILL Jones.com.
And for me, Twitter is honestly the best place to get in contact with me. You'll see me post things about the videos and other podcasts that I do. I'm at the Kyle Marshall. That's Marshall with 2 L's.
And up until now, we've been talking about pop culture and haven't got a ton of responses, but I bet, Kyle, when we start talking about sex, we're gonna get a lot of emails.
That's right.
Until then,
I'm looking at you, Pope Francis.
We got 2 more episodes coming out, hopefully before then, and this is a chance for us to share what's going on in our life. So stay tuned for that next episode in 2 weeks.
Assumptions is produced by Kyle Marshall and Daniel Melville Jones. This week's music was all done by the same band, the Parson Redheads, whose latest album, Blurred Harmony, is available on iTunes and anywhere else that albums are sold. Yes, even physical media. The artwork for Assumptions is done by Chris Taniguchi, who you should go and check out his new YouTube channel. I'll link to that down in the description below. And Daniel and myself already told you all the other different ways that you can get in contact with us, but Twitter, Facebook, and even our email is assumptionspod. And for our email, it's @gmail.com. Hopefully you'll be in contact with us. We're going to come at you again in 2 more weeks. We'll see you then.